Gabriel adjusted his stethoscope nervously, his fingers trembling slightly as he stood in the bustling hallway of São Vicente Hospital. The air smelled of antiseptic and anxiety, a combination that seemed to cling to the walls. It was his first day as a resident, and the reality of what lay ahead was already sinking in. Around him, doctors and nurses moved with purpose, their voices blending into a constant hum of urgency. "Gabriel, let's go," called out Dr. Helena, the attending physician assigned to supervise his group of residents. Her tone was firm but not unkind, snapping Gabriel out of his thoughts. "Yes, doctor," he replied, quickly following her into the emergency room. The scene was chaotic. Patients on stretchers lined the walls, nurses darted between beds, and the sound of monitors beeping filled the air. Gabriel's heart raced as he took it all in. Dr. Helena handed him a chart. "You're on triage duty for the next hour. Assess the patients. Prioritize who needs immediate attention, and notify me of anything critical." Gabriel nodded, but the weight of the responsibility made his stomach churn. He approached his first patient, a middle-aged man clutching his chest, and began asking questions, trying to recall everything he'd learned in medical school. His voice was steady, but internally, he was second-guessing every decision. The day took a sharp turn when a nurse rushed over to him. "Dr. Gabriel, we have a pediatric emergency in room 3. A 7-year-old boy with severe abdominal trauma. They need you." Gabriel froze for a moment. A child. His pulse quickened as he followed the nurse to the room, where the boy lay pale and motionless on the stretcher. His parents stood nearby, their faces etched with panic and helplessness. The boy's condition was critical, and Gabriel knew time was running out. "Gabriel, what's the plan?" Dr. Helena's voice brought him back to the present. She stood in the corner, observing but not intervening. Gabriel hesitated, his mind racing through possibilities. He felt the weight of everyone's eyes on him, the parents, the nurses, and even Dr. Helena. His throat went dry, and for a moment he considered stepping back, letting someone more experienced take over. But he knew this was a test, not just of his skills but of his resolve. Taking a deep breath, Gabriel gave instructions to the nurse. "Start in 4 with fluids. We need an ultrasound immediately to check for internal bleeding." He looked at Dr. Helena, who gave him a subtle nod of approval. As the team worked, Gabriel found himself moving on instinct. He recalled his training, compartmentalized his fear, and focused on the boy in front of him. When the ultrasound revealed internal bleeding, Gabriel relayed the findings to Dr. Helena, who took over and prepared for surgery. "You did well, Gabriel," she said later, as they walked out of the operating room. "You made the right call." But Gabriel didn't feel victorious. He thought about the boy's pale face, the parents' tears, and the moments of hesitation that could have cost a life. The weight of the day pressed heavily on him as he returned to the residence lounge, collapsing into a chair. That evening, as he walked home through the crowded streets of the city, Gabriel replayed the events of the day in his mind. The hospital felt worlds away, but the emotions lingered. He thought about his family, his mother's pride when he graduated from medical school, the sacrifices they had made to get him here. And yet, standing in the ER, he had felt anything but prepared. "Am I really cut out for this?" he muttered to himself, his voice barely audible over the noise of the city. When he arrived at his small apartment, Gabriel sat in silence for a long time. The shadows of the day clung to him, and doubt gnawed at his resolve. He wanted to believe he could do this, but the reality of the responsibility terrified him. Before going to bed, Gabriel picked up a framed photo of his late father from his desk. His father had always dreamed of seeing him become a doctor, a dream cut short by a preventable medical error that had claimed his life years ago. Gabriel had promised himself that he would make a difference, that no family would feel the pain his had endured. But now, he wasn't so sure he was strong enough. As he placed the photo back on the desk, Gabriel took a deep breath. Tomorrow would bring another shift, another chance to prove himself. For now, all he could do was rest and hope that he would find the courage to keep going. Gabriel entered Sal Vicente Hospital the next morning with a heaviness in his chest. The weight of the previous day's events lingered, and self-doubt gnawed at him. As he walked through the crowded hallway, he avoided eye contact with the staff, keeping his head down. He wanted to be invisible, to hide from the responsibilities that came with the white coat he wore. "Gabriel, there you are," said Dr. Helena, her voice firm as always. She handed him a chart. "You're assigned to Ward C today. Rounds start in 10 minutes. Don't keep the team waiting." "Yes, doctor," Gabriel replied, his voice barely above a whisper. He clutched the chart tightly and headed toward the ward. The walls of the hospital felt like they were closing in, the constant beeping of monitors and the hum of fluorescent lights amplifying his anxiety. Ward C was bustling with activity. Gabriel joined the group of residents and interns gathered around Dr. Helena, who was briefing them on the patients. One by one, they presented updates on their cases. Gabriel listened intently, trying to absorb the information, but his mind kept drifting back to the boy from the day before. The memory of his hesitation, the split-second doubt that could have cost a life, haunted him. "Dr. Gabriel," Dr. Helena called, snapping him back to the present. "You're up. Tell us about Mr. Almeida in bed 6. Gabriel quickly flipped to the chart, scanning the notes. Mr. Almeida, 54 years old, admitted for chest pain. Initial EKG showed signs of myocardial infarction. He was started on anticoagulants and beta blockers last night. His vitals this morning are stable, but he's reporting shortness of breath." "Good," said Dr. Helena. "What's your plan?" Gabriel hesitated. He glanced at the chart again, his mind racing. I think we should order a repeat EKG and check his troponin levels to rule out ongoing ischemia." Dr. Helena nodded. "A reasonable approach. But remember, clinical decisions aren't just about tests. Talk to the patient. Listen to what he's feeling. Sometimes that tells you more than any lab result." Gabriel felt a twinge of embarrassment, but nodded. "Yes, doctor. I'll check on him now." As the day wore on, Gabriel found himself increasingly overwhelmed. Each patient brought a new set of challenges, and the pressure to perform was relentless. By midday, he was called to assist with an elderly woman who had collapsed in the waiting area. He and a nurse worked quickly to stabilize her, but a mistake in his calculation of her medication dosage nearly caused a serious complication. Dr. Helena caught the error just in time, correcting it before any harm was done. Afterward, she pulled Gabriel aside. "You need to focus," she said, her tone serious but not harsh. "Mistakes happen, but they can cost lives. You're better than this, Gabriel. What's going on?" I don't know if I'm cut out for this," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "Yesterday, I froze. Today, I almost made a critical error. Maybe I'm not ready for this responsibility." Dr. Helena sighed, her expression softening. "Every doctor feels like this at some point. You're not supposed to have all the answers right away. That's why you're here, to learn. But if you let fear paralyze you, you'll never grow. Remember why you chose this path." Her words struck a chord, but Gabriel wasn't sure if they were enough to ease his doubts. As he walked away, he spotted Ricardo, another first-year resident, smirking at him from across the hall. "Rough day, Gabriel," Ricardo said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe this isn't the right place for you." Gabriel clenched his jaw but didn't respond. He knew Ricardo was trying to get under his skin, and it was working. The competitive atmosphere among the residents only added to the weight on his shoulders. That evening, Gabriel sat alone in the break room, staring at his reflection in the darkened window. He thought about his father, about the promise he had made to himself to become a doctor who truly cared, who wouldn't let patients slip through the cracks. But now, that promise felt like an impossible burden. Just as he was about to leave, Dr. Helena walked in. "I know today was tough," she said, sitting across from him. "But I've seen you with patience, Gabriel. You care. That's more than half the battle. Don't let one bad day make you forget why you're here." Gabriel nodded, her words giving him a glimmer of hope. He still wasn't sure if he was strong enough for this journey, but for now, he decided to take it one day at a time. Gabriel arrived at the hospital before dawn, the early light barely piercing to the towering skyline of São Vicente. He was determined to make this day better than the last, but the lingering doubt still tugged at him as he stepped through the automatic doors. The hospital was quieter in the early hours, yet the weight of its urgency never disappeared. Dr. Helena greeted the residents with her usual no-nonsense demeanor. "Today we'll test you," she began. "We're short-staffed, so you'll need to handle more cases independently. Don't panic. Use your training. And remember, I'm here if you need guidance." Gabriel nodded along with the rest of the group, though his stomach churned. He was assigned to the internal medicine ward, where he would oversee a mix of chronic and acute patients. Among them was Dona Marissa, an elderly woman recovering from pneumonia. Gabriel met Dona Marissa mid-morning. She was propped up in bed, knitting with shaky hands. Her lined face broke into a kind smile when she saw him approach. "Good morning, doctor," she said, her voice raspy but warm. "You're new, aren't you?" Gabriel chuckled softly. "Is it that obvious?" She nodded, setting down her knitting. "You have that look, a mix of nerves and determination. Don't worry. I've seen many young doctors come through here. You'll find your footing." Her words were oddly comforting. As Gabriel reviewed her chart, they talked about her recovery, but the conversation naturally drifted to her life before the hospital. She spoke of her late husband, her grandchildren, and the garden she missed tending. For the first time in days, Gabriel felt a connection with a patient that went beyond symptoms and diagnoses. The day's calm didn't last. Around noon, a call came through about a middle-aged man in respiratory distress in the emergency department. Gabriel was the closest resident available and rushed to the scene. The man, Mr. Araujo, was gasping for air, his face pale and slick with sweat. Gabriel's mind raced as he evaluated the situation. "His oxygen levels are plummeting," a nurse said, handing Gabriel the patient's chart. "History of COPD." Gabriel called for a non-rebreather mask and ordered a dose of bronchodilators. As they worked to stabilize Mr. Araujo, Ricardo appeared in the doorway, arms crossed and a smug expression on his face. "Need any help, Gabriel?" Ricardo asked, his tone condescending. "This looks a bit advanced for you." Gabriel ignored him, focusing on Mr. Araujo. The man's breathing began to stabilize, and his color improved slightly. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Gabriel felt a flicker of relief as the nurses took over for further monitoring. Ricardo smirked. "Not bad. Lucky for you it wasn't more complicated." Gabriel clenched his fists but held his tongue. He couldn't afford to let Ricardo's words derail his focus. By the end of the day, Gabriel was physically and emotionally drained. As he walked past Dona Marissa's room, he paused and peeked inside. She was asleep, her knitting resting in her lap. The sight of her peaceful face reminded him of why he had chosen this path. That night, Gabriel sat in his tiny apartment, staring at the faded photo of his father. He thought about the mistakes he had made, the doubts he carried, and the moments of connection that reminded him of his purpose. He wasn't perfect, but he was learning. And for now, that was enough. The next day would bring new challenges, but Gabriel was beginning to understand that each step, no matter how small, was a step forward. The hospital was in chaos. An accident on the highway had resulted in a multi-vehicle pileup, and São Vicente was receiving a flood of emergency cases. Gabriel had barely arrived when Dr. Helena summoned the residents to the emergency department. "This is a mass casualty situation," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We need all hands on deck. Triage is a priority. Assess quickly, stabilize, and move on. Gabriel, you'll lead a team in Triage Zone B." Gabriel's heart dropped. Led a team? He wasn't ready for this. But before he could protest, Dr. Helena had already moved on to give instructions to another resident. He took a deep breath and hurried to his assigned area. The scene was overwhelming. Patients on stretchers lined the hallways, some conscious and moaning in pain, others eerily still. Nurses darted between them, calling out vitals and updates. Dr. Gabriel, a nurse, said, tugging at his sleeve, "We have 3 critical patients here. What's the priority?" Gabriel scanned the room. A woman with a head wound was losing blood rapidly. A teenager struggled to breathe, and an elderly man had no visible injuries but was unconscious. He could feel the weight of every second ticking by. The head wound first, he decided, pointing to the woman. She's losing blood too quickly. Start a pressure dressing and prepare for sutures. Then the teenager, get him on oxygen and monitor his vitals. Keep the elderly man on standby for imaging. I'll be back to reassess him. The nurse nodded and sprang into action. Gabriel moved from one patient to the next, his mind racing but focused. Each decision felt like a gamble, but there was no time for second-guessing. As the day wore on, Gabriel found himself thrust into situations he had never imagined. One moment, he was stabilizing a patient with a collapsed lung. The next, he was assisting in the operating room as surgeons fought to save a young woman with internal bleeding. Sweat dripped down his face, and his hands ached from constant motion, but he didn't stop. "Gabriel, over here." Ricardo's voice cut through the noise. Gabriel turned to see his rival struggling with a patient in cardiac arrest. "I need help." For a split second, Gabriel considered letting Ricardo handle it alone. But the thought vanished as quickly as it came. This wasn't about rivalry. It was about saving lives. He rushed over and took over chest compressions while Ricardo prepared the defibrillator. "Clear," Ricardo called out, and the patient's body jolted. The monitor beeped, and a faint but steady rhythm appeared. Gabriel let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Good work," Ricardo muttered, his usual smugness replaced with something that almost resembled respect. By the end of the shift, the emergency department was finally beginning to quiet down. Gabriel sat on a bench in the hallway, his scrub stained and his body exhausted. Dr. Helena approached, her expression unreadable. "You did well today," she said, sitting beside him. "You made tough calls under pressure. Not every decision will be perfect, but you kept moving, and that's what matters." Gabriel nodded, too drained to respond. He thought of the patients they had saved and the ones they hadn't. The weight of those losses sat heavy on his chest. "Remember," Dr. Helena added, "you're human. You'll make mistakes and you'll face situations you can't control. But the fact that you care, that you keep showing up, that's what makes a good doctor." Her words stayed with him as he left the hospital that night. The city was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos he had just left behind. Gabriel walked slowly, the events of the day replaying in his mind. He thought of his father, of Dona Marissa, and of every patient who had looked to him for help. For the first time, he felt something shift within him. He wasn't just surviving each day. He was growing, learning, and proving to himself that he could handle the fire. And tomorrow, he would do it all over again. Gabriel arrived at the hospital the following day, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and determination. The chaos of the mass casualty event had left an indelible mark on him, but it also kindled a deeper resolve. Today, he told himself, he would move forward with a clearer purpose. The morning started with Dr. Helena addressing the residents. "Yesterday was one of the hardest days we've faced this year," she said, scanning the group. "But you all stepped up. Remember, medicine isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. Gabriel, I want you to shadow me during rounds today. There's a case I think you'll find valuable." Gabriel nodded, feeling both pride and nerves. He followed Dr. Helena into the ICU, where they stopped by a bed occupied by a middle-aged man with multiple injuries from the highway accident. Monitors beeped steadily, and the man's face was pale but calm. "This is Mr. Tavares," Dr. Helena explained. "He was one of the critical patients from yesterday. You helped stabilize him in triage zone B. He's recovering well, thanks to your quick decisions." Gabriel's chest swelled with a mixture of relief and pride. He remembered the man vividly, how every second had felt like an eternity as he made decisions under immense pressure. Seeing him stable now felt like validation. Dr. Helena turned to him, her expression serious. "I know the losses weigh heavily, Gabriel, but this is the balance of our work. For every patient we lose, there's one like Mr. Tavares, alive because we didn't give up." Later that afternoon, Gabriel found himself face-to-face with Ricardo in the break room. The tension between them had eased slightly since their shared effort in saving a patient the previous day. Ricardo leaned against the counter, his usual smugness replaced by a more subdued demeanor. "You did well yesterday," Ricardo said, breaking the silence. "I mean it." Gabriel raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Thanks. You did too." Ricardo hesitated, then sighed. "Look, I know I've been hard on you. It's just, this residency is brutal, and everyone's trying to prove themselves. But you showed real leadership out there. Maybe I misjudged you." Gabriel wasn't sure how to respond. He had spent months resenting Ricardo's competitive attitude, but in this moment, the hostility seemed to fade. "We're all in this together," Gabriel said finally. "There's no room for rivalry when lives are on the line." Ricardo nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Truce." "Truce," Gabriel agreed, shaking his hand. That evening, Gabriel visited Dona Marissa. She was sitting up in bed, her knitting needles clicking softly. When she saw him, her face lit up. "Dr. Gabriel," she said warmly, "I heard you've been very busy saving lives." Gabriel chuckled, pulling up a chair. "Something like that. How are you feeling today?" Dona Marissa. "Better," she said, her hands pausing for a moment. "But more importantly, how are you? You look tired, but there's something different about you. You seem stronger." Gabriel smiled, her words resonating deeply. "I think I'm starting to find my footing," he admitted. "It's not easy, but I'm learning." Dona Marissa reached out and patted his hand. "You have a kind heart, doctor. That's what makes you a good physician. Don't ever lose that." As Gabriel walked home that night, he reflected on the day. The weight of the previous weeks was still there, but it felt lighter now, tempered by moments of connection and progress. He thought of his father, whose memory had been both a burden and a guiding light, and realized that he was honoring him by persevering. For the first time in a long time, Gabriel felt a sense of balance. The road ahead would still be challenging, but he was beginning to trust in his ability to navigate it, and that, he thought, was enough to keep going. Years had passed since Gabriel's first uncertain days as a resident at Sal Vicente Hospital. Now, at 32, he walked the same hallways with confidence, his white coat a symbol not just of his profession, but of the journey that had shaped him. The hospital was still as bustling as ever, but Gabriel had learned to navigate its chaos with a calm steadiness that inspired those around him. Today, Gabriel was not just a doctor. He was a mentor. A group of wide-eyed first-year residents trailed behind him, listening intently as he explained the intricacies of patient care during rounds. Among them, a young woman named Anna reminded him of himself, eager to learn but weighed down by the pressure of the role. "Remember," Gabriel said, pausing in front of a patient's room, "being a doctor isn't about knowing everything right away. It's about listening, learning, and caring. The rest will come with time." Anna nodded, her face a mix of gratitude and determination. Gabriel smiled, recognizing the same spark he'd once carried, even in his darkest moments. Later that day, Gabriel found himself in the hospital garden, a rare moment of quiet in his otherwise hectic schedule. He sat on a bench, enjoying the warmth of the sun. In his hands was a letter he had been carrying for weeks, one he hadn't yet found the courage to open. It was from Dona Marissa, who had passed away months earlier after a long battle with illness. Finally, Gabriel unfolded the paper, his heart heavy with anticipation. Her familiar handwriting filled the page. "Dear Dr. Gabriel, if you're reading this, it means I've moved on to a better place. But before I go, I want you to know how much of a difference you made in my life. Your kindness, your patience, and your unwavering dedication gave me hope when I needed it most. You're not just a doctor, you're a healer. Never forget why you chose this path. It's not just about curing illnesses. It's about touching lives, and you've touched mine in ways I can't fully express. Thank you for everything. With love and gratitude, Dona Marissa. Gabriel felt tears welling up as he folded the letter carefully and placed it back in his pocket. Her words reminded him of why he had endured the sleepless nights, the self-doubt, and the countless challenges. It wasn't about perfection. It was about connection, about being there for people in their most vulnerable moments. That evening, Gabriel stood outside the hospital, watching the sun set over the city. He thought of his father, of Dr. Helena, of Ricardo, and of Dona Marissa. Each of them had played a part in his journey, teaching him lessons that went far beyond medicine. As he turned to head back inside, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Anna. "Thank you for your advice today. I really needed it." Gabriel smiled, tucking his phone into his pocket. The road ahead was still filled with challenges, but he was no longer walking it alone. He was part of a legacy, one built on compassion and resilience. And as he stepped back into the hospital, he felt a quiet certainty. He was exactly where he was meant to be,